Worth with the Encourage Your Wellness podcast. And today I have Christina Lecuyer, and she is an amazing former professional athlete, TV host, health and wellness champion, professional coach. Christina, take it away.
Yeah, girl. Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you've been through this incredible journey. Tell us what health and wellness kind of meant to you before and what it really means to you now and how you got to there. What was really the...
Yeah, I think there's two sides of it. For me, it's like the mental side of health and then the physical side of health. So just to kind of give a quick 2-second background, I always tell this fun little story that some people laugh at. But when I was 18, two things happened to me. I always say this funny little thing, but when I was 18, two things happened to me. One, I got really good at golf, and two, I got good looking. And what happened during that time, and people always snicker, but what happened when those two things came together was I truly started loving that experience. I became addicted to the external validation. Like, you're so pretty, you're so good at golf, your life's going to be amazing. And all of this when I was 18. And, sadly, for about 10 years, I became addicted to that. Atta girl is the way that I called it. I got addicted to that external validation, and I was doing anything under my power to get more of "you're so amazing." And for me, in my brain, that meant get skinnier, get richer, get on the tour. So I played, I went to college for professional golf. I played professional golf once I was over. I never ended up getting my tour card, but I did create a horrible eating disorder, and I created a life that I was really out of alignment with. It was always based upon what is the thing that I can do to get happy? And so that's why I say it's both like the physical health and the mental health. But I did struggle with an eating disorder for, probably at least 10, 15 years. I was definitely on the more bulimic side than anything else. But my whole focus was, if I get skinnier, I'll get the jobs, I'll get the attention. So I was doing some modeling stuff, doing some television hosting stuff. And I just associated my worth with being skinny. And so for me, health never was a consideration for such a long time. It was like push my body to the absolute max. I was the cardio queen. I was the typical person, get on the Stairmaster. Like, I used to pride myself that I could do the Stairmaster for 2 hours a day, 100%. Like, I would out Stairmaster anyone. And I did have big muscle legs at the time, which I hated, but it was funny that I was on a Stairmaster for 2 hours a day, and I couldn't tell you why my legs were so big. But for me, it was just the health aspect of actually being healthy was never a priority. It was always just about being skinny. And I always say that when I was like 27, I came to this kind of roadblock. I'd failed getting my tour card 3 years in a row. I was probably at the peak of what everyone said. I was making money. I had the same relationship. So my husband and I have been together for 20 something years. We weren't married at the time, but I was in the same relationship. I had the external validation. I was playing golf. I was making $10,000 a day playing golf with executives. I had television, and I was miserable. And so I remember waking up, I think it was in our back bedroom. I was ironing at like 10 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, this was not the plan for my life. Like, what actually happened? And I looked around, and there was people who had a lot less than I did in regards to external stuff. And I thought, how is everyone happier than me? And really at 27 is when I really start to dive into the power of the mind. I became obsessed with everything personal development that there probably was. And I realized about that time that I had to take personal responsibility for my life. And I always say the greatest thing that anyone can ever do is take personal responsibility for their life, for their happiness, for their health, for whatever. And so for me, from 27, I'm going to be 42 this year, I've been obsessed with creating the best life ever, the best health ever. I now walk every single solitary day, not to stay skinny, which is kind of funny. I'm probably I'm at 40, almost 42. I'm probably in the best physical shape I've ever been. And the only thing I concentrate on now is, does this make me feel good? And sure enough, I'm actually in the best physical shape that I can be. So that's kind of a quick version of, how I went from really feeling unworthy and miserable and not sure if I wanted to live to what I now say is my tagline is, I have the greatest life ever because I decided it.
No, that's amazing. I have a lot of friends that struggle on and off with eating disorders. And How did you get through that? What was really, I mean, it's a really big deal. I mean, it's,
It is.
what was the process? How did you do this? I mean, it's,
Yeah, and I've never been to any sort of treatment. I think it's a combination of what the three pillars of everything I coach on, which is decision, faith, and action. And these are the three things that I coach and preach on in my performance coaching, whether it be for business and or personal. And I remember being over top of the toilet, and this is, TMI for so many people, but I still have scars on my knuckles for making myself throw up. And I used to, if I always associated it, if things were going good, I never had to do that. But if things were going bad, I had to do that. And so, like, if I played bad golf, I was bad. And I was very much, and I've noticed this with so many people that I work with, is people always associate what they do with who they are. And those are two very separate entities. And for me, it was like, if I was playing bad golf, I hated myself. Or if I didn't get that television contract, I hated myself. And so, to kind of go back to your question, I was literally on top of the toilet and I just made a decision in that day. It was almost like that come to Jesus moment. And an eating disorder is the same, very similar as an addiction to alcohol or drugs or whatever it is. Like, I think for me, it was just, I started realizing that the power of the mind, in my personal opinion, is the strongest thing on planet Earth. Like, your thoughts become your reality. And I knew that if I just decided I was no longer going to do this anymore, I also realized that I had to reprogram everything that I had done up until that point. So I always say that you have to reprogram stories, patterns, and habits. Well, my situations, my habits, my patterns had gotten me into this. Like, when I do something, this was my go-to. And so I made the decision that I was no longer going to throw up. So I had to decide to do something different to reprogram that habit that I had of, like, binging and purging or whatever it is when I felt bad. And so I really just decided that I was going to reprogram that with something that was serving me as opposed to something that wasn't. And I also say too that, I am a Christian. I work with a lot of clients who are not Christians, but for me, you have to believe in something greater than yourself. You have to believe in a higher power. And for me, it's God. I don't care what it is for you. I always say, you can say God, source, universe, doorknob. I don't care, but you have to believe that there's something outside of yourself. And I think that was the first time when I made that decision. It was the first time that I had said, oh, I can't do this all by myself. Like, I have to have help. I have to believe that there's something out in this world that wants better for me. And I think that the second thing really about that is, number one, I made the decision, and two, I reprogrammed what I was doing to get a different result. And the third thing that I think is really helpful is that I knew that there was something better for me. And I think that was the first time that I started having hope. They say oftentimes, and I'm definitely not educated in suicide, but they say that people that end their lives have no hope. And I had hope at that point in time because I knew I was starting to help other people. I was starting to find passion for things that were not golf, because I was only playing golf because I was told golf was going to make me happy and make me rich and make me famous and all that kind of shit that it never did. I checked the boxes and it didn't give me that sense, but I started understanding that, like, I did have a greater purpose on this planet. I did have a reason, and I had something greater than myself. And so I think it was a combination of all three of those things. And I can firmly tell you that I do believe 100% certainty that I am healed and cured from that. And I know a lot of people can never say that, but I have had zero desire to do that probably in 7 or 8 years. Like, it has never even crossed my mind. I remember probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I got sick. Like, I threw up for the first time because I was actually sick. And I remember it being a very traumatic event. Like, my husband, like, I was shaking, and because it was just bringing back so many of those horrible memories. But yeah, I do believe it's possible to heal yourself from it. And hopefully I can give someone else hope.
before you were cured, was there like an activity or a thing that you would do if you ever had an inkling that you may want to?
Yeah, for me, it was just like, take myself out of the situation. Ed Milet is a big person in the personal development space, mindset space, whatever you want to say. And he says that like you have to create some sort of trigger. And what really resonated with me as a golfer, a lot of golfers have a pre-shot routine. And in golf, it takes 4 to 5 hours to play golf. And if you're thinking about golf for 4 to 5 hours, you're probably going to play really bad golf. The only time you actually have to think about golf is when you're right on top of the ball. And you start with the process in a pre-shot routine. And a lot of people, like a guy will grab their glove, or they'll grab their, they'll put their hand on top of the club, or they have a very similar pre-shot routine. And so I kind of associated what Ed Milet said of like, have a trigger to get you out of what your normal habit is of when you were going to purge. And so, for me, it was just like literally as hard as it was. And I always say that like your bad days, like people always say like, is working with you going to change everything? And I was like, no, but we're going to take your bad days from here to like here, to where my bad days used to be like a week. And now bad moments can be like minutes or an hour. And that is such a win. So for me, it was just like, when I'm feeling this way, how do I take myself to do something that's completely different than the pattern I had before? And so for me, I would literally just grab my crap and go outside and go for a walk, or I would take myself into a different room, or I would take myself into a different situation. I would walk outside. I would do anything to like basically reprogram the pattern that I had of going to food and going to the bathroom. And so for me, it was just like I had to like replace that trigger. And an elastic band, I've told this to clients for years, like put an elastic, like a hair tie around your wrist and snap that, because what you're doing is you're doing something to stop the typical pattern that you normally had. So snap that elastic and make yourself do something different to start that as your reprogramming.
That's really smart.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
I think that would work really well with teenagers too.
Yeah. Like honestly, like people ask me all the time, like, what do I actually do as a performance and mindset coach? And I like, if you really break it down, I figure out what story, pattern, and habit that you have currently that is not getting you the result that you want. So like, I often say like, your parents, your upbringing, something happened and you have a pattern, story, or habit that is not getting you the result that you want. So in order to get a different result, you actually have to reprogram whatever it is that's holding you back from getting what you want with a different story, pattern, or habit to get you the result that you do want. Money is a very good example. People grow up with a horrible money mindset. Doesn't mean your parents are bad, doesn't mean anything, but like those are your parents' stories. You don't have to take your parents' stories anymore. So we have to implement different stories, implement different patterns or habits to get you what you do want. It's like so not hard, and yet it is the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Yeah. And those are the things that I wish I had I don't know if it's being stubborn or just closed-minded in your 20s. Like that stuff is so much easier in your 40s. I don't know. Anyway, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
So you're going through all of this. Thankfully, you're still with the same person at the time, boyfriend, now husband. How much was he involved in that part of your journey?
Everything. I think he knew about my eating disorder. So we started dating, I was like 21, I think. So yeah, it's like, because we've been together like 22 years. So yeah, we started dating. He probably knew within 6 months. Not very many people knew at the time, but people always ask, because I now believe with whole heart, the best thing that's ever happened to me in my whole entire life is my marriage. My husband is like the greatest human on the planet. I think we have an amazing marriage. I'm very, very blessed to say that. But there has been different seasons. And when we first met, I was definitely a train wreck. And I always say that like, he was never a part of my decision to change my life. I had to decide that whether he was in or he was out. I got very, very lucky that he decided to get in on this whole transition of my life that I've had over the last 15 years. But unfortunately, because a lot of women say to me, a lot of people come to me and say like, I want to do this thing, I want to make these changes, but my husband's not on board. And it is a very hard thing to do. But I knew I was so dedicated to changing my life because I ultimately believe all of us were put here for a purpose and a reason, and it is our God-given responsibility to do so. So, like, even if my husband never would have got on board, I still had to do the things that I needed to do. And that's a very hard thing to say. And I am now sitting in a position where my husband did get on board, but I made that decision before I knew he was going to get on board. I just happened to have a great human who was willing to like decide that he was going to make some changes, decide that he was going to get on this train too. And we've also both gone through very hard seasons of our life. So like I was a train wreck, then he was a bit of one, and then I was one. And we seem to be in a pretty good season now, but it's kind of been nice because like sometimes when I'm high, he's low, and we've done that. We sometimes look at each other like we're both in a bad season. We got to change this.
Yeah, everything that goes up goes down, everything that goes down goes up, and there
Yeah.
is equilibrium in the middle. It's just, yeah, no, it's good that you guys support each other. That's super.
Yeah, he's definitely on, and he's totally into self-development too. Like, I mean, he's got his own coaches. He implements everything with his teams. Like, I mean, he brings in offsite meetings. They do SEO, like they do traction. And like, I mean, they've implemented everything under the sun to just try to be the best versions of themselves. And I'm very grateful that he's on the same page as I am.
That's awesome. So, where are you going now? What are you doing? What is really driving you and giving you your purpose and mission?
Yeah, for years when I first started out, because how I started the coaching, like I never set out to be a coach. What I really started realizing is that in the beginning, it was a lot of guys that I was working with. So in the beginning of my golf career, I was trying to play professional golf. And then it kind of transitioned to, I realized that I was kind of good at three things, but when you put all three of those things together, it actually, I called it the trifecta. I was kind of good at golf, I was kind of good looking, and I was kind of good at communicating. And when you put those three things together, that's a really good way of creating business connections on the golf course. And so companies used to hire me to play golf with executives. And I did that for about 10 years. But in the meantime, what was kind of happening was people were always asking me how I was so positive and how I had done the things that I had done. Like I didn't have a tour card and I was getting paid $10,000 a day to play with executives. And there was LPGA girls that were getting $500 in the Southwest seat. I was like, no, I'm first class or private, take it or leave it. But I had the mindset, I had the confidence, and I started creating this really cool career. And then a lot of people started, I guess I have this ability to just be vulnerable. I'm very vulnerable. And I think that vulnerability allows other people to feel safe around me. And I started kind of being a bit of that person that most people wanted to kind of go to. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars to other people to learn this kind of crap. Maybe someone would pay me. And slowly but surely, and then there was a lot of women that were coming to me and saying like, how do you have the confidence to be able to charge these rates? How do you have the confidence to stand in front of a room of 500 guys and be able to command the room? Like, how do you have that? And so slowly but surely, my business started to really organically grow. And when I first started, I was doing conferences, like live in-person events, and I was doing mastermind groups, bringing women together. And then I was doing one-on-one coaching with guys. But I've really transitioned now to what most people would say is a really bad business model, because it is. But I love it and the results are there. So I just do one-on-one coaching. I have two ways to work with me. I do full-time coaching, where I help people like performance and mindset. Definitely a lot of my people that come to me, I'd say about 70 to 80% are business people, because, business is lonely, and being a high level person is lonely, and it feels very vulnerable to say that to someone. But I think life is done better. We're not meant to do life alone. And I think having someone who really supports you and allows you to trust yourself and allows you to make these decisions and allows you to have that safe space because you're kind of that person for everyone else. That's how I really kind of started this, and why I have a lot of executives work with me. And then I have like a monthly subscription. So just one call a month and just really that long-term accountability that a lot of people like. So I basically only do one-on-one coaching. I'm very, very blessed. I take 30 people, which I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's freaking a lot to hold 30 people's lives and businesses. But I'm sold out most of the time. I usually have like one spot available because people come and go. But I do a lot of speaking events. I do a lot of in-person events for businesses. And yeah, I'm excited. It's what I do and I love it.
No, that's cool. So do you find that each person is a little bit different in how you work with them, or is it kind of
Absolutely. Everyone has, I always say that everyone has 2 to 3 things that are their thing. So like, is it, your worthiness thing? Is it your trust thing? Is it your accountability thing? Is it your confidence thing? Is it, your inability to make a fast decision thing? But everyone has 1 to 2 things. And I think that just having someone to be that safe space for the person who is the person for everyone. I have a lot of, I'm just thinking in particular about the call that I had before our podcast was like, business owner, 7 or 8 employees, does about 3 to 5 million in revenue, but everyone's coming to her and she's got kids at home and a husband. And, really I'm kind of her space to kind of process and make fast decisions, because when you can make a fast decision and you trust yourself, you have a tendency to really be able to move faster and grow quicker. And then also working with teams and learning how to trust yourself and knowing that like when you're feeling like you're making all of the wrong decisions and nothing's working, I'm kind of your person to tell you, don't worry, we're good.
I love that. And then, so some people might say, well, why would I hire a success coach instead of a psychologist? And so maybe, kind of explain the difference between like some of your ways of communicating.
That's a fantastic question because it's so funny. I get asked this all the time. What's the difference between a coach and a therapist? Because I am 100% not a therapist. But what I will say is I can know within one call why you are the way you are. A therapist wants to talk about that for a really long period of time. The difference between a therapist and a coach is like, I know why you are the way that you are. Your mom screwed you up. Someone told you this. Someone told you this when you were 15 years old that has made you do this thing for the rest of your life. My job is to help you reprogram that in order to get a different result. I don't want to talk about it all the time. We don't have to talk about it. We don't even have to actually know why it happened. Like usually it's helpful to know like you were told this and this made you like this, but this habit, story, or pattern is not getting you the result you want. So in order to get a different result, we have to implement a different story pattern or habit. And so like, I think that's what I really do with my clients. That's a difference between a coach and a therapist. I'm not there to talk about it. I'm there to help you take actions to get a different result.
Which frankly sounds better to me. So
I get that. I would never say that, but every one of my clients have said, I have done therapy for years. Why did I not just hire you? I said, good question.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular in your training or your life experiences? I mean, obviously we talked about a more traumatic one. Is there anything that kind of like television or golf or anything that's really kind of given you the foundation that you needed to be a successful coach?
I just think that I really, really love people. Like I love what I get to do. I don't think you'll find a happier person than me. And I say this with also saying that there is shit going on in the back of my life all the time. Like I have all sorts of troubles, like I have all sorts of crappy things going on. Nothing is perfect, but it's just that training of just knowing and believing and trusting that everything is working out for me. I was doing a podcast yesterday with a gentleman from India. And I said, when I have this like belief that everything works out for me. And I use the example of like, let's say I miss my flight. Well, of course I miss my flight because everything works out for me. So my next flight, I might be sitting next to a person that's going to be the most perfect business connection I've ever had in my whole entire life. Or perhaps there was something wrong with that plane, or perhaps I needed to be late for the next thing so I could meet this perfect person. Or let's say I make my flight. Well, of course I make my flight. Everything works out for me. So it's like that belief system that I have that there's always a way to yes. I learned that from one of my mentors. I climbed Kilimanjaro with a children's hospital back in 2019. And one of my good buddies and mentors, he was on the trip and unbelievably successful, have had 4 to 5 businesses, all over 8 figures, bought and sold and all the things. And he said to me, his belief that there's always a way to yes has guided him in business. And I love that, because there's always a way to yes, and everything always works out for me. And it truly is kind of woo woo and cuckoo. And you might think I'm crazy as shit, but also give it a try. Like, if you truly do believe that everything is working out for you, and if you can find proof that everything is working out for you, I just think that you too can literally have everything that you want. A lot of people know Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, but it's very much the similar type of thought process where he says, like, everyone can be a millionaire. Everyone can do this. Everyone has a responsibility to do this. And once you brainwash yourself enough to believe that that is true, it's almost impossible for it not to be.
Yeah, that's true. Anything else that you want to make sure we touch on? How do people thank you? What else?
Sure. I just think that, your community is definitely wellness based. And the one thing that I would say is I am definitely not a doctor. I'm definitely not someone who's educated in any of the things that most of your guests are. But the thing that I am very much educated in is the power of the mind. And you told me on our podcast together that when your mom said she didn't want to pass, you're like, perfect, no problem. You're not going to. And I think that that's one of the, whether you realize it or not, that ability to believe that you've decided, like my podcast is Decide It's Your Turn, because it's a decision that does not waver based upon circumstances. To me, that's a definition of a decision, something that does not be wavered upon depending on the circumstances. Like, I've made the decision not to drink wine today. Well, when your kids go to bed and they're pissing you off and you drink wine, that's not a decision. I always use that one as an example, because every woman, like every mom of like a 10-year-old wakes up and be like, today's the day I'm not going to drink wine. And then your kids are crazy as shit, stressed out about this, homework there, and you're like drinking the bottle of wine. No, that's not a true decision. A decision is something that is not wavered upon. But for those of you who are in the midst of your health journey right now, just make that decision and believe that you will find a way to yes, and believe that everything is happening for you. And if you work that muscle, I always say that confidence and adequacy and self-trust is a muscle. The more that you do it, the stronger it becomes. So if you are in that stage, in that journey right now, work that muscle as much as you can. Build that muscle of just believing and trusting that you will figure it out. You will heal yourself. Everything is working out for you. The universe is conspiring for you to be healed and feel healthy.
That's awesome. How do people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest place to find me is on Instagram. I show up there every single day. It's me. It's not my assistant, but it's Be Christina, because I encourage everyone to be themselves, be your most authentic self. So be Pamela, be Christina, be Karen, be you. So Be Christina. You can find me on all of the platforms, but Instagram and LinkedIn is probably the two that I hang out the most.
Super. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.